let's see, we haven't been here long enough yet, but maybe we can interweave some of the reading. So if you would like to tell us a little about the book, and then maybe
Sure.
some more questions later.
Yeah, well, Intention Tremor, this is what it looks like with all my little dog ears on it. This, well, a little history. The whole reason I wrote this book has to do with the fact that 8 years ago, last Saturday, actually, I was given the preliminary diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. And not something anyone ever plans to have happen to them. I was in the middle of studying for finals. I was back in sleep technology school. I was going back to school in this intensive medical credential program. And I sat down with my giant sleep medicine tome and flipped it open to start doing my, studies for the finals, and I couldn't read. I could see, I'd driven myself to a place to do the studying and plucked, my earbuds in, and I was ready to go, but I couldn't read. And it was weird. It was just like, what? Because I could see, and it wasn't like a migraine where I had cluster spots or anything. It was just, I just couldn't see. I mean, I couldn't read, couldn't comprehend. And so immediately I called my doctor. He saw me that day. I guess sometimes living just a little bit at the edge of the city, you can get in faster to see a doctor. And he checked me out and then literally sent me across the parking lot at the campus to the MRI, which was right there. They had an opening. I went in, and then 2 days later, he called me and said, well, we found lesions on your brain that are consistent with multiple sclerosis, pretty clear. Wow. And so, but they can't diagnose you. You have to really see a neurologist to get that diagnosis. So he hooked me up with an amazing woman neurologist at Virginia Mason Hospital here in Seattle named Dr. Tamara Kaye. And I went through all the tests, and for a person getting a diagnosis of MS, it was relatively speedy. It was about 5 or 6 weeks between that first MRI reading and then my final diagnosis. For some people, it can be years. So, but I went through all the tests, all kinds of stuff, including the dreaded spinal tap, and that answered a lot of questions. I was able to, I was able to read again once it turns out that the reading thing is really a miscommunication between certain parts of my brain. And it comes from stress, and who isn't stressful during finals week? And I had other things going on too besides that, other personal stuff going on. So so it came back, and it has kind of flashed off again from time to time, and it's usually after a period of a lot of stress or a lot of work with the computer, which isn't necessarily an eye stress thing. It's just more of a you spend a lot of time at the computer before a screen. It does things to your brain. I've read some studies on that. So anyway, and so that's why I wrote this book. Well, that's not why I wrote this book. That was the source for all the material in the book. About 6 months later, I went to a creative writing intensive that I began to go to pretty regularly after that, up in Port Townsend, Washington. And I went there. It's in the campus where there's a couple of campgrounds, and I have a travel trailer. So my husband set up our trailer, and I stayed up there all weekend. And I love having a campfire. That's like one of the most meditative things that I can do for myself. And I have a fire table at home too, same idea. And fires, and even the indoor fireplace. And that was the very first moment of it dawned on me that I need to write about this, because like everybody else, when you find out you've been diagnosed with something, you want to know everything. Well, maybe not everybody, but I wanted to know everything I could about it. I wanted to know, because to me, information is knowledge. And so I went, of course, online, which is not advisable. I mean, it's just, you just don't know what kind of information you're getting unless you know how to discern good information from bad. But I went online and I learned all the clinical stuff, and I could master the scientific stuff. That was fine. But I wanted to hear the stories of people who were living with it, because after the diagnosis, you still have to live with it. And you still have to deal with all the hoops you have to jump through that are, administrative, like going through the hospital system and insurance, one of the biggest nightmares of all time, right? All the circus tricks you have to perform just to get treatment for a disease that you didn't ask for, you didn't do anything, you didn't deserve it, it wasn't anything like that. And aside from some forums, which have been instrumental in keeping me mentally healthy with this disease, because I found my people, I really couldn't find a lot of writing about it, especially poetry. And for me, poetry kind of, it tells those stories in an intense, honest, authentic way that nothing else can compare. And so that's when I was inspired, sitting around that campfire, to write poems. Actually, I'll read to you, if you don't mind, I'll read to you the first poem that came out of that experience. I didn't plan on reading it, but I'll read it. It's really short. So it's called Kohls. And this is in the fall of 2013. Kohls, in a circle, glowing red pomegranate seeds, a random blue flame, licking its way through the cracks of light and dark, tasting the wind for direction. I poked at the flares, my mind black as the night sky. I stirred the embers so they could not grow silver skins. I could not know they were a puzzle to be solved. Flares and embers in white and black film taken every 6 months with and without contrast dye. This night, the moon hovers super behind a veil of preternatural mist, brighter and closer to the answer than any fire I could ever build. And I dedicate that one to the contingent that goes to the that particular writer's intensive every year, because they were what great energy they brought to my experience there. There are quite a few poems that were written there that are in this book. I've also gone to other places and gone camping or gone to Airbnbs and written there too. When it was in the winter, and it was probably not a good idea to go camping because you're hauling a trailer somewhere. But yeah, so that was the beginning of it. And so I wrote it. Well, the next thing I'd like to say about it is that I intended to write it as what is known as an abecedarian, which is a compilation of pieces with the starts or the titles of each of them falling in line with the letters of the alphabet. So each piece would start with a different letter. There'd be the poem A, the poem B, the poem C. And I got about 21 out of 26 of those letters done. I even had Z. And then I laid everything out and I realized that they needed this. The poems themselves were great, but they weren't in the right order. And of course, an abecedarian orders everything. And so I made the decision not to do it in that order. And I also made a second decision, and that was to turn some of the poems, sort of alter them to be more prosaic. And the reason I did that was that I felt like a book of only poems would be kind of an artificial version of who I am. Because as you pointed out earlier, Judy, I have taught short fiction and flash fiction workshops, and I am a fiction writer, and I am also a nonfiction prose writer. And truth be told, prose is my first love. So while I also love writing poetry, it would be dishonest, I think, to have a book that didn't show all the sides of me as a writer, because I have, sort of fingers in all those pies, as they say. And so I decided to take some of those and play around with their shapes and move them around a little bit. I had some help from a wonderful woman at the Hugo House who helped me. Her name is Megan Snyder Camp, and she kind of helped me look at the story or the order of the pieces in the book, and also to find those underlying themes that you don't always necessarily see your own themes as they present themselves. It's good to have someone with fresh eyes to look at that. So between her feedback and then my feeling that I wanted it to be even more, you know, like me as a writer, I took it there. And so I created these other pieces, which are more like prose poems. And there's some kind of essays that are written almost like, I don't know, in fragments. And that was so much fun. And I felt like the whole thing was really my book. It was really truly me as a person. So does anybody have any questions at this point before I go forward?
I think
Okay.
we went past my question and now I can't think of it.
Oh, that's okay. I would like to read then. Let's see. Let's not go there. I know it's going to come to me. It's coming to me. Some of these are kind of difficult to read because they have I'll show you. I don't know if you can see that, but you really need to read it on the page because of the shape and the structure of the piece. And that particular poem had to do with me having problems with speech and word finding. I did have a lot of sciencey things. So yeah, that's what I'm going to read next. That's the other part of this book, is that I really wanted to integrate science in my poetry, in my writing, in this very creative way. I don't think of the two as being at odds with one another. And recently, I went to the AWP conference. It was virtual this year. And I sat on some panels and listened to some writers talk about poetry and science. And first of all, it was amazing that almost all the panels, both of the panels I sat on were almost entirely made up of women, which was amazing. It's like, yes, STEM women talking about science and poetry. That was awesome. So that alone was like worth the price of admission right there. But I found, I loved it. I actually loved listening to them talk about the fact that poetry and science are both reaching for the same things, really reaching for truth and reality and understanding. And they're experimental. And you're just using different tools in the toolbox to get to, whatever answer it is you're trying to find. Or as I mentioned in my last poem, to solve that puzzle. Because poetry is about solving puzzles. I think all kinds of storytelling, whether it's in a poem form or an essay or, a medical research paper, it's all about solving a puzzle. So, and certainly that's what science is about. So I want to read this piece to you. There's one, now this one I'll just kind of show you on the page, if you can see that. It's more of a prose, I'm going to do, here we go. So it's written more like a mini essay, and it has a very long chunk at the beginning. One phrase that I want to describe at the beginning so you understand when I talk about it later, it's PML. And PML stands for, and have patience with me on this one, progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy. I did it. And all kidding aside, it is actually the name of a really dangerous viral brain infection that you can get. It targets the cells that make the coating on your nerve cells in your brain. And it's deadly. It can be deadly. Most of the times it's deadly. So when you are taking a medication for multiple sclerosis or for many other autoimmune conditions too, it's not just MS, you have to watch your white blood cell count, because if it goes too low, then you can be at risk for this infection in case you have another thing happen. And that is called the JC virus. And that's what this poem is about. The JC virus. Well, let me just read this excerpt from Pathophilia. John F. Cunningham was a patient at the VA hospital in Wood, Wisconsin in the summer of 1970. Cunningham had Hodgkin's disease and rather rapidly progressing neurological deficits. He was given a diagnosis of PML during life on the basis of a brain biopsy, and thereafter expressed the wish that his brain should aid research into this fatal disease. A new human polyoma virus was subsequently detected by the co-discoverer, Dr. Gabrielle M. Zhu Rhine, and her colleagues in Cunningham's postmortem brain tissue. And the virus was named JC virus in honor of the patient. And here's the thing with JC virus, nobody really knows when they have it. Like 2/3 of the American or the human population carries it and doesn't even know they have it. But if you have it and then you have a low white blood cell count, you could then suddenly have this problem with PML. So this is like the intricacy of living with MS, because there are just layers and layers and layers of things, like a perfect storm of things that happen in order for MS to actually even become a thing. So that's what makes it so complicated to research. So this is my poem about JC virus, and it's called John Cunningham Lives. Dear John, you are in our cells, our thoughts, our cerebrospinal fluid, a host virus that haunts the chosen few. This is the way it always is. Not everyone who enters a haunted house will see a ghost, even when the spirits come down from the attic to throw parties that linger late at the kitchen table, leaving behind toast crumbs. You don't mind being rejected by us. You get it. You would hate yourself too if you knew what had gotten into you. You linger in at least half of all of us, often dormant for a lifespan. But sometimes the conditions of mitochondria achieve a vortex, and there you are, the one we get to blame. Like most of us, you didn't choose your end except to share what little was left of you. Bits of gray matter, extracted, smudged against slides, cultured to curate what would become the discovery of a new intracellular virion. In a sense, your identity wasn't alive to us until well after you died. Your act of leaving became, ironically, a permanent earthbound stay defined by your acronym, JCV, with PML riding shotgun, dark partners to interrogate under naked light bulbs. Because we broke you, we now know one way to retard the curse of unintended consequences. My friend Jay gifted his genome to science to discover why cancer loved him so much. I still shed tears for the cross-sections of Lucy at Chicago's Museum of Natural History. Henrietta Lacks didn't have a choice. Hers a theft of mother culture by the privileged of the ivory tower, yet birthing a new paradigm of consent, life in spite of death. I do wonder, look back, do you ever look back and find you rue your gift? Wish instead to leave behind something other than the vector of a rare brain infection? Would you apologize to those with AIDS, to organ transplant patients for riding roughshod over their immune systems? You shouldn't, because you let us peek under your hood. We know now what to look for when we peek under our own. I'm glad with every 6 vial blood draw taken every 3 months to find you haven't dropped your inner tube into my bloodstream. You, the hero I hope to never meet. So that's what I mean by, oh, thank you. That's what I mean by science. I really wanted to have that intersection. Part of the reason I went back to sleep technology school was because I really wanted to pursue more science writing, and to have medical credentials behind my other skill set would have made that possible. And it most certainly has. I still, to this day, am writing about sleep health to educate patients and also to educate my peers in the sleep technology field. So it's great that I can also then use science and poetry together in my creative life. It's very fulfilling. So, and I love that I had forgotten that I'd mentioned Lucy in there. Lucy from Chicago's Natural History Museum. I mean, that's always something I can't wait. I've been to that museum many times, and that's the first thing I have to go and see. So I'm not sure how you guys are doing with the quarantine there, or not the quarantine, the pandemic. And I know that Chicago's had ups and downs. I tend to watch Chicago's numbers as much as I watch Seattle's numbers, just because I have so many loved ones there too. Um, I did write a poem about quarantine though, but it wasn't during the pandemic. It was written in 2016. Now, the thing with autoimmune conditions is that you have really messed up immune systems. And the medications, in the case of MS, the immune system is in overdrive. So when you take a medication for MS, it's to literally dampen it, or I'm trying to think of the word, but dampen is probably the best word, to kind of shut it down so that it doesn't continue to, level an assault on the nerves in your brain. So, so during the winter and stuff, I get my flu shot for protection, but because I'm taking a medication that shuts down my immune system, I become very concerned about picking up other people's germs. And that's true for, again, anybody with an autoimmune condition, because you're really just trying to balance out, the playing field so that your immune system has a fair shot to protect you. So I did write this poem about quarantine, and reading it now, where'd it go? There it is. Okay. Reading it now is really fascinating, because now the things that I talked about in this poem were sort of not really in the zeitgeist, and now they really are. So it's kind of spooky to read this again after it was written 5 years ago. It's called Quarantine. That's the title is the first word of the poem, first line. Quarantine begins between Halloween and Veterans Day after my flu inoculation. Safeway grocery shopping happens after 8 p.m. or not at all. Bottle of hand sanitizer in my pocket for times when the store supply disappears. Wearing a face mask doesn't really protect me from the hacking up of lungs and other fine particles that people seem happy to share with neighbors. I reserve these for plane trips made necessary by work interests, hoping to send a message of awareness. I have been lucky so far. Head colds that last 14 days. That feels like norovirus GI tract disruptions, more likely related to meds, but no real influenza. Immunocompromised, I belong to that exclusive club filled with babies and old people defending against that much larger club who fears the modern miracles of vaccines, eschewing science, praising herd immunity. I'm no germaphobe. This is no hypochondriac's fable. I've been told don't risk it by more than one physician. My DMTs, which are disease-modifying therapies, render blood test results that mirror the compromise of AIDS. So I choose quarantine to survive 6 months of other people's freedom of choice. Yes, they're out there and they're deadly. People with MS die from smaller things, after all, like hospitalizations for UTIs that the healthy cavalierly fend off with glasses of cranberry juice. The days dawn dark until March, prompting morning rituals with happy light and coffee cup. I can't take vacations from Facebook lest I lose touch with people who care. Ponder the simple gift of having a husband who looks forward to daily grocery trips. So pretty stunning that I was thinking about that. So I have to say, people in the chronic illness communities do have this sort of, we already know how to do this mentality, and we're kind of proud of it. We know how to hunker down. We know how to just do what we have to do. It's not a problem. So it is always stunning when people complain because like we do this every year. So if there's one of those hidden blessings or silver linings, that has to be. Take your wins where you can get them.
We have another question from Becky.
Okay.
Who are your favorite fiction authors that appear to integrate science most effectively?
Whoa, fiction authors. Margaret Atwood. the Mad Adam trilogy. She is just the queen of social commentary anyway in her science fiction. I would also say Ursula K. Le Guin. She's definitely, I'm trying to think of the name of her book, The Lathe of Heaven, which was all about sleep and prescience and all of this. Oh, amazing. So those two immediately come to mind. As far as science goes, I tend to like science social commentary more than I do hard science fiction. So I'm not sure I could recommend. But I have to say that I think the ones that integrate science most effectively, whoever they are the ones that take it beyond the science and bring it closer into the experience of human, the human experience, lived experience. So I think a lot of speculative fiction might fall into that category too. There's a really, I don't know if I would call it science fiction or not, but there was the book The Power by Naomi Alderman, and it was a speculation on young women suddenly developing this this new ability to deliver like an electrical shock from a part of their body to anybody. And that became a huge worldwide story because now suddenly women literally had the power. And while there's no science behind that, the ideas behind that to me had a lot of science behind them, just, harnessing power, however you want to call it. As far as nonfiction, I really love The World Without Us, because it talks about if the human beings just disappeared off the planet, what would happen if we just suddenly evacuated and left everything as it stands. And it really says a lot about the human impact on our world. And there's a lot of science in that too. So anyway, those are the ones that just come to mind.
Glenda has a comment.
Yeah, I think I am
agree.
unmuted.
Why don't you go ahead and say it as long as you're unmuted.
Okay. I was going to say that I think people should read your book along with Gillian Weiss's The Amputees Guide to Sex. I don't know if you've read it. Came out quite a few years ago. And it reminds me so much of your book because it takes us right into the experience of being an amputee, all the things we don't think about that are required, all the questions about your existence and your identity that are bound up in this medical condition. And of course, she took a rather sensationalist view of it at first. I think a lot of people pick it up because they say, well, I wonder how amputees do have sex.
Yeah, of course.
But she educates you well beyond that. And I appreciated that so much about your book. But the last thing I wanted to say was I also see your magical realism in this book. I felt as if I were traveling those neural pathways with you, those silver glints. And, the starburst in the sky. I mean, we all have an interior world, that we live in our head for the most part. Well, at least some of us do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I definitely do.
Maybe not everyone, but a lot of us do. And I think that Intention Tremors draws us into thinking about what our consciousness really is. I mean, what it means to us in terms of what would we do if the synapses were missing? What would we do if there were blots? How would we cope? What does that mean for us? That all the things we take for granted. Of course, that I have a neural condition too that gives me very severe tremors that can get grow into contortions at times. It becomes absolutely impossible to think when those are going on. It's just not possible. But I think there are many other conditions people have beyond MS that also make us question our mental acuity at times. And yet we're still very much still ourselves and have the same intelligence and have the same knowledge base, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we have trouble accessing it. So
Yes.
yeah, I feel like it's a wonderful service to all of us that you've done here.
Oh, well, thank you. That just sparks so many thoughts. Yes, I mean, I might be writing about MS, but I think this book's for anybody who's ever had to deal with even a temporary illness where they've been waylaid and set out for several weeks or something, where it's, you feel it and how it does shape you. I mean, it's amazing. And I have not read that book, so I'll have to check it out. I'm definitely, it's on my list now because I want to read it. I've been collecting so many books. I did just watch the film that's up for an Academy Award called The Sound of Metal. And I don't know if you've seen it yet.
No,
You have seen it?
not yet.
Oh, you've got to see it.
It's on my list.
I don't want to spoil it, but I do want to just say, I mean, it says it right in the description. It's the story of a young man who is a heavy metal or punk drummer and suddenly loses his hearing. It is so much more than that, though. So much more than that. There's so many layers to that movie. I think I sat at the edge of my seat for the entire film. So it's not a comfortable film, but that's its beauty because it's so freaking honest. And it really seeks to show the way that your identity becomes divided by who you are, who you want to be, and who your illness will allow you to be. And sometimes you can beat that illness down and say, I'm going to do this anyway. I know, Glenda, you beat that illness down constantly. You're sticking it, you know, you're saying, I'm going to do this anyway. But, you know, there's a cost to it that you didn't have, you know, when you were healthy. And that's something that people don't understand, is the price that you pay. Actually, that reminds me of a poem.
Before you go into the poem, I want to welcome Linda Mowry, who just joined us.
Hi, Linda.
You can unmute yourself.
Okay. Hi, Tamara. I'm
so glad you're here. No, I'm so glad that you're here.
I'm glad you're still at this. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. So,
I'm sorry, we got a gift from Zoom. They're not limiting us to 40 minutes. So anytime you're ready to end this.
Okay.
You know, I mean,
Do we have enough time for one more?
Sure.
Okay.
We have all the time in the world, apparently.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Okay, but I don't want to, you know, we're not going to go overtime. I do want to read this poem because this is sort of that headspace that you can get into, and I'm really glad you brought that whole thing up, Glenda, about it, because there is something that I'm still pursuing in my own writing, and that's the idea of the diagnosis mind. That once you become diagnosed, it alters everything that you do and see and interpret in the world. It's like the first time you become pregnant, if you've been pregnant. Not everyone's been pregnant, obviously, but if you've been pregnant, the moment you know you're pregnant, everything that happened before that is just not even, it's way in the past, and everything is about looking into that new world that is created. And that's the same with a diagnosis, no matter what it is. And so, of course, like most people, we all go looking online for information, and you can suddenly feel like everything you experience is related to your illness. And then you can kind of get sunk down into that kind of ravine of identity. Who am I with this illness? And forget that you were the same person today that you were yesterday before you were diagnosed. But sometimes you end up like you're trying to wrestle with what that means, and you can feel somewhat like a hypochondriac. So even my husband thought I was a hypochondriac until he saw the big thick file from the doctor and the scans of my brain. And then it was like, oh, you are not. And he's great now once he figured that out, because it's so invisible. You can't always see it. So I'm going to read this. It's a blitz poem, which is a very specific, very dynamic form. The poem is called Diary of a Syndrome, a Hypochondriac's Blitz. And I'll end it with this because I think this is a good one to end it with. Hiding the truth, hiding a diary in permanent ink, diary of symptoms, symptoms of the brain, symptoms of the body, body of knowledge, body of evidence, evidence of foul play, evidence-based, based on opinion, based on facts. Facts don't lie, facts on file. File this, file a claim, claim ignorance, claim a dependent, dependent upon circumstances, dependent upon your survival, survival of the fittest, survival story, story structure, story of my life, life force, life with chronic illness, illness and injury, illness and wellness, wellness center, wellness plan, plan for the worst, plan for the unexpected, unexpected company, unexpected pain, pain in the ass, pain management, management of symptoms, management experience, experience setbacks, experience of a lifetime, lifetime warranty, lifetime commitment, commitment heavy, commitment fatigue, fatigue at work, fatigue syndrome, syndrome actor, syndrome or disorder, disorder, actor. I love that form. I want to do more of those. Thank you. Yeah, it's challenging to get past. You know, I do want to read one more because I think we talked about this too. About I've talked about this a couple of times about we go online and we don't know where we're getting our information from unless we have a lot of practice. And there are so many people who know everything, right? And this is the other part of maybe something I haven't talked quite as much about, but even the most well-intentioned people in our lives will, you know, try to give us advice about something they know nothing about. And so you have to take it all and understand what's in their hearts and go with that. But when you're going into like a forum where you don't know anybody and you have a conversation, sometimes it can get really ugly, actually. Because of this sense of everyone thinking that because they can get on the internet that they read one thing and they know everything. So I'm going to close with this piece because I enjoyed writing it, and people seem to really appreciate it, and it's so relatable no matter what condition you have. It's called The Expert, and it's I don't know if you can see that. It's written kind of like a prose poem with 4 stanzas that are without line breaks. The expert sits online, overstimulated by blue spectrum light, scouring for evidence, though all he understands is purely anecdotal. The first person accounts, the stories from a friend of his sister's boyfriend's boss, he misinterprets clinical studies, decides 2 and 2 equal 5, wonders why science is taking so long to discover a capital C cure. He is not a biologist, but he might be a theologist. He does not know B cells from jail cells, from T cells, from killer cells, from supercells. He thinks the cure is known, locked in a cylinder in a vault in Antarctica, where nobody will ever find it except through an act of espionage. He thinks sick people are the cash cows of the corporation, that vaccines are for fools, that medicine is poison, big pharma the enemy. But vitamins are miracles, even when they cost you your electric bill. And if you drank special water, ate special diets, performed special yoga poses, the gut biome would reverse itself and eliminate your dis-ease. Our web evangelizer believes you will fall for his friendly profile picture, the posts about his dogs, his misspelled words, and conspiracy theories posted at hours when only insomniacs breed. Who knows who he really is? To be sure, we could all stand to look in the mirror to see who we are and who we are not. All right, thank you. Thank you so much for listening and for having me here today.
Thank you for coming.
Thank
This
you.
was neat.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
It
Tamara,
was really wonderful.
Where's the
See
best
you for you.
place to buy your book?
Oh, where to buy the book? You can go to my website, which the easiest place is to go to TK Sellman. Sellman is SELLMAN. So TK Sellman, all one word, .com. And at the top, you can click on Buy Intention Tremor. And when you buy it through me, it's a couple dollars more because I have to cover shipping and handling.
Right.
But what's really important is that I'm selling this book. All of my proceeds are going to an organization called the Accelerated Cure Project. They help research scientists in the field of MS to manage and accelerate data processing from the studies themselves so that they go faster. A lot of the times the slowness of a research study is because of all the data they've collected, and they need to find ways to capture it and interpret it in a way that's faster than what has been in the past. And that's what they do. And right now, all the MS research is at a standstill for good reason, because all those researchers, all the money, all the subjects, all of the labs and resources are all going to COVID-19 vaccines and treatments and everything that we need to know. So that's fine. That's totally fine. It's totally necessary. But when MS research can get back going again, they're going to need this acceleration. So when you purchase a book through me, I get to sign it for you too, and I'll mail it off to you. But more importantly, more of that money, more than half of the price of that book is going to actually go to the charity, because I'm not taking any of that money. So if you want to buy it from me. But you can also buy it anywhere else. You can buy it anywhere where books are sold.
Definitely buy it from you. Okay, very good.
Yay. No, I love it. I love being able to go to the mail stop and
yeah. I also have a really, really good friend with MS, and I am going to buy her one as well. So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And yes, I mean, I hear a lot from people who have friends and family members who have MS, and so they buy copies. And
yeah.
I just hope that I want, my biggest goal is to explain this and to maybe empower some people, to raise awareness, and of course to raise funds too. But all of those things. So thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. It was such wonderful, just writing. I mean, everything was incredible. And I love your sort of background, stories, I guess, your backstory,
Oh,
great.
thank you. It's funny how, I feel at this age, I'm 55 now, and I feel at this age, I'm finally really, all these crooked paths in my life have finally converged, and I'm actually doing everything that I've always wanted to do, and I'm on the path that I feel like I always should have been on. So, I mean, honestly, MS is, in a weird way, given me the opportunity to really live my best life, even though it is a pain in the ass.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you for joining us. As I said, it's more than neat, but that was the only word I could come up with at the moment. And I hope we can do it again on your next book.
Oh, well, always working on something new. So I hope I can report something.
We can do this again in a little while if you want to push it again.
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely. I love talking about it. And the more I'm really proud of this book. I mean, I think a lot of people are a little nervous with their first book, like, oh, it's not my best work. And I feel like, I think I really worked hard on this. So I'm happy to share.
And I was thinking earlier that if you wanted to do a poetry workshop, you'd have at least one person signing up.
Well, I am working on some coaching for people who have chronic illness who want to write about it. And that's something that's in the works. I can't really announce anything yet because I'm still working on it. But the whole goal is to find ways, and virtually is perfect, right? We could sit down, and it always has been perfect. I've always wanted to teach a class on writing about illness, especially for people who are disabled or have chronic illness, or even a bad injury or an invisible illness, mental health, any of those. But having a live class kind of is a barrier. And to me, I mean, also having a virtual class has its own kinds of barriers. So we don't have subtitles or closed caption, for instance. And that's really important too, because people need that. But, and then some people really have issues just staring into a screen. I know I do. I mean, it's hard. So there's no perfect solution, but I love that people are more familiar now with the virtual. And so I'm working on some coaching, which will eventually lead to some smaller books, you know, and tools for helping to teach eventually some workshops and how to navigate writing about illness from wherever you are, whether you're a practiced writer or a brand new writer, because we need all those voices out there, all of them.
I'm going to look into how do we get captioned on Zoom, if we can.
Yeah, I don't think they offer it. Last I heard, they don't offer it, but maybe they do, and that's a new thing. I think that came up a lot at the AWP and the disability groups the panels that I sat in on. There's a lot of discussion about why we don't, although they, at AWP in their own panels, it was fantastic. They actually pre-recorded their panel sessions and then ran subtitle or a closed caption on those, and then played those during the sessions and then ran the chat part live. So you could interact with the actual speakers in the panel during the panel discussion. And it was the best AWP experience I've ever had. So
That was wonderful. Maybe they should always do it that way.
that's what we were saying. But yeah, I know, but they probably won't. And it's really sad because a lot of people who have health conditions can't make it to AWP because it's so huge. And you have to schlep across, you know, a giant campus, and it's exhausting. The only thing that I would say was not so great was the book fair, because I think the book fair really needs to have that tactile experience. Yeah, and they didn't have that, so I missed that. It's one of my favorite parts of it. So, but I wonder if there's a way they could do a hybrid. You know,
Yeah.
Why not?
Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. Well, the Disability and Deaf Caucus is working on it. That's a group that interacts with the AWP and with their constituents, and they are working on it. So we'll see what they can pull off. You never know.
Terrific.
And be sure to advertise.
I have to leave. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
Be sure to advertise your writing for people on disabilities on Jane Story's Book Buzz, because I want to sign up.
Okay, I will definitely when it's, and I'm hoping that will be done within the next couple of months. And again, it's going to start out with coaching, but even the coaching can be.
Coaching.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
even the
I have to
coaching.
get my ears cleaned out.
No, no, but that could even be really helpful because there's so much just to talk about when it comes to writing as a person with an illness, just even the writing life aspect. So, and I hope from that I can sort of build a small, tight-knit community. That's my goal, where we can cheer each other on and then really help each other when we do sit down and actually have like writing exercises. But I am reading a ton of work written by people from all kinds of persuasions, let's say, and finding some really wonderful writing out there. So when the class does come, you're going to have some great reading to do.
Great. Yes. Now I have invisible ones too. I was radiated for tonsils, and as a result, I've lost my thyroid and my parathyroids. So nobody can tell. So.
Yes. Yeah. You know, that's interesting. But you can tell, and your voice obviously changes as a result of that. There was an interesting panel discussion on what was it called? I can't think of the name of it now, but it was talking about poets who have trouble speaking, that's a problem, because if you're a poet, you want to perform your work, but if you have some kind of a
Dyspraxia, probably.
What's that?
Dyspraxia.
Something like apraxia, or actually a friend of mine, a really wonderful poet friend of mine who has MS or some kind of mysterious neurological thing that's very similar. She can't get enough breath to even make sounds, and so when her poetry is wonderful, and so she has people read for her. But I mean, it would be so much greater if she could read for herself, because it's her work, and she gets to interpret it. So that was really Denise Alito. She has a severe issue with her voice, and she spoke, And then there was Jennifer Bartlett, and she has cerebral palsy, and so she has some issues with speech. And so she's like, yeah, I sound like I'm drunk, and then people just look away. And then, you know, it's just really unfortunate because one of my favorite poets is Ilya Kaminsky, and he's a deaf poet from Georgia and former Russia. And he has this, so he speaks with I call it a deaf accent, okay? Because he has, you know, there's that hearing impaired influence over the way he makes sounds. But then he also has this Russian accent on top of it. But once you sit and listen to him, once you tune to it, you can hear him just fine. It's fine. But it's really unfortunate because if people, you know, would just learn to have some patience and listen, they're missing out on some of the most amazing poetry. And then this is one of our finest poets in this country right now. And the last time I heard him read, he gave out handouts of his poem to everyone in the audience as so they could read along. And I thought but that's an exceptional length that you have to go to just to be heard.
Yeah.
So that's just, you know, on the one hand, I'm so glad I heard it. And you know, I've heard him many times, but I actually sort of know him now. But I mean, for people that have never heard him, they really need to. He's just amazing. It's amazing. So people who have problems with speech and who are poets, it's a huge barrier and obstacle that we've got to do something about. So
Yeah.
anyway,
thank you again.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Tamara.
It was really fun to be here, and I appreciate the time, and look forward to more things happening with Jane Stories. So glad that it's still around too.
Yes.
All these years.
All right. Good to see you.
All right. Good to see you. Thank you so much, you guys.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.